All right, strap in, everyone. Today, we're taking a deep dive that's going to take us through psychology, crime, and a whole lot of questions that really make you think. We're looking at this fictional true crime podcast. It's called Literary Echoes, and they have this really unique approach, you know?
Yeah, definitely unique.
They're comparing, like, a fictional character from a classic novel, Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, to a real-life murder case, one that's all over the headlines.
And not just any character either. It's Raskolnikov, the main guy, the one who does, and Literary Echoes is finding all these, connections between him and this guy, Luigi Mangione. Seems like a pretty successful young guy, but he just got charged with this, crazy murder.
Yeah, that's what really got me hooked. Like, what makes people do stuff like that?
Yeah.
Especially people who seem to have it all, you know? I mean, that's what this podcast seems to be trying to figure out.
It is really smart how they do it, too. Using fiction as a way to, understand what's happening in the real world, looking at these big ideas like alienation, finding your purpose, and morality, stuff we all deal with, just in different ways.
For sure. Okay, so quick recap for anyone who hasn't read Crime and Punishment recently, or ever. Raskolnikov, he's this super smart but poor, ex-student living in Russia back in the 1800s, and he comes up with this radical philosophy.
Radicals, putting it mildly.
Yeah, he thinks some people, like extraordinary people, are above the rules, like they can do whatever they want, even kill if it's for some greater good.
Uses Napoleon as an example, right?
Right.
But here's the thing. Raskolnikov doesn't just talk about this stuff. He actually does it. Kills this pawnbroker, saying he's getting rid of a parasite, helping society.
Chilling. And that's where the podcast brings in Luigi Mangione. Because on the surface, this guy has it all. Rich family, Ivy League education, great job in tech. But he's accused of killing the CEO of a huge healthcare company. I mean, talk about a high-profile target.
And just like Raskolnikov, Mangione writes this manifesto using some of the same, creepy language, calling corporations parasites. Makes you wonder, is he trying to be some kind of, twisted hero? Is there a connection between coming from privilege and then, doing something like this?
Blows my mind. On one hand, you've got Raskolnikov, driven by poverty and desperation, and on the other, you've got Mangione. He has every advantage. But the podcast is arguing that they both ended up on this path to violence for similar reasons.
Yeah, they seem to be focusing on this whole idea of alienation as a big factor. Raskolnikov shuts himself off, obsessed with his own thoughts. Mangione, even though he's successful, apparently withdrew from people, became really isolated.
That's what I find even more disturbing about the real-life case. We think money and success protect people from this dark stuff, but Mangione's story says it's way more complicated than that.
Makes you wonder, right? Could intelligence, especially when someone's so isolated, make them more likely to buy into radical ideas? Is that a risk?
That's a scary thought. And it fits with both these cases. It's like their intelligence, instead of helping them connect, became a way to justify what they did, Like a tool to help them go down that dark path.
And it really gets you thinking, how much is this about what's going on inside their heads versus, the pressures and failures of the world they're living in? Raskolnikov struggling with poverty and inequality. Mangione maybe disillusioned with the whole corporate world, even though he's part of it.
Yeah, it's almost like they both felt the system had failed them. But instead of trying to fix things, in a good way, they decided to go for this messed up idea of justice, this justification for violence that's just, totally twisted.
And that's where Dostoevsky is just brilliant, right? Crime and Punishment isn't just about the crime. It's about what happens inside Raskolnikov's head afterward. Even with his reasons, the guilt and paranoia just eat him up. Shows you that you can't escape the consequences of killing someone.
Exactly. So is the same thing going to happen to Mangione? Will he face that same reckoning? Will he still think his justifications make sense after what he's done?
Now that's the big question, isn't it? Can any ideology, any belief system, really protect someone from feeling the weight of what they've done?
Yeah.
From the morality of it all?
Yeah.
I mean, can it?
Yeah, it's like both of these stories, even though they're from totally different times and situations, they show us this uncomfortable truth about people that even if you're smart, even if you have potential, there's still this possibility for darkness inside,
That's what makes this podcast so interesting, right? It's not just comparing two cases. It's looking at the bigger picture, these themes of feeling alone and trying to find your purpose. Makes you think about how those things could show up in our own lives,
It really does make you think about the different ways people can be alienated.
Right.
Raskolnikov, it was poverty and extreme ideas.
Yeah.
Mangione, maybe it was privilege and being disillusioned with the system that gave him everything, right?
Yeah, and both of them using violence to, like, try to take control to make a statement, even though it's totally messed up.
Right.
It's like they were both screaming, but in completely different ways.
And that's what I think is really cool about this Literary Echoes podcast.
Yeah.
They aren't just saying, oh, these cases are similar. They're digging into how each guy justifies the violence, you know?
Yeah, they point out how both Raskolnikov and Mangione come up with these elaborate reasons for what they did.
Right.
Raskolnikov thinks he's doing something good, getting rid of a parasite.
Yeah.
Mangione, maybe he sees himself as fighting against corporate greed.
Like a Robin Hood or something.
Exactly, but like Dostoevsky shows us with Raskolnikov, even if you have the best reasons, you can't just erase what it does to you to kill someone, you know? The guilt, the paranoia, it all comes crashing down.
Totally. So will the same thing happen to Mangione? Will he have that same reckoning? Will he still believe in his justifications after what he did?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can any ideology, no matter how strongly you believe in it, really protect you from, like, feeling the full weight of your actions, from facing the morality of it all?
It's almost like the podcast is holding up this mirror to society, making us confront the fact that even people who seem to have it all can have this darkness inside them.
Yeah, and it makes us think about the bigger picture, too.
Right.
Like, are there things in society that contribute to this alienation and despair?
Yeah.
Are we all, in some way, responsible for creating a world where this kind of stuff happens?
Whoa, that's a big question, but I think it's one we need to ask, you know? If we want to stop more Raskolnikovs and Mangiones from happening, we have to understand what makes them tick, what cracks in the system let these ideologies take root.
That's where literature, even fictional podcasts like this, can be so valuable. They help us explore these really complicated issues, make us think about our own beliefs, and consider what could happen if we let alienation and despair just fester.
Right. It's like this podcast is using these extreme cases to show us something about being human. We all want purpose, connection, a sense of justice. But the way to get those things, it's never simple.
Nope.
And when those needs aren't met, when people feel alienated and powerless, sometimes they look for extreme solutions.
Yeah.
Like they latch onto ideologies that give them this false sense of control.
Or like they're doing something righteous.
Right. The podcast ends on kind of a hopeful note, pointing out how Raskolnikov confesses and starts trying to redeem himself.
Yeah.
But Mangione's story, it's still going on. Makes you wonder if he'll have a similar wake-up call, if he'll ever face the reality of what he did.
It's almost like Dostoevsky's giving Mangione a roadmap, right? Showing him that it's possible to find redemption, to atone for what you've done. But it's up to Mangione, you know? Will he take that chance to really face his actions, to have that moral reckoning? Or will he just stay stuck in his own beliefs?
It makes you think about, like, our own responsibility, doesn't it? Not just to, like, understand this stuff, but maybe even to see the warning signs, you know? In ourselves and other people before things get really bad.
Totally. The podcast kind of hints at this idea that these tragedies aren't just about the individuals messing up. They're about society messing up, too.
Right.
It's like they're saying, if we want to stop this from happening again, we have to create a world where people feel seen, heard, valued, you know?
Yeah, that really resonates with me. Because both these men, they were searching for something, right? Purpose, meaning, wanting to make an impact, but they went about it in the most destructive way possible.
And that's why this whole discussion of alienation is so important. If we can figure out what causes it, poverty, isolation, even the pressure of having too much now, then maybe we can start actually addressing it.
Yeah.
You know, doing something about it.
Yeah, it's almost like a call to action, you know, like be more present in your own life, reach out to people who seem disconnected, fight against systems that create inequality and isolation.
And encourage critical thinking, you know, being skeptical but in a healthy way, and empathy. Those are the things that can help us figure out those tricky moral questions and stop those dangerous ideologies from taking over.
This deep dive has really given me a lot to think about. It's shown me how powerful fiction can be, you know, for understanding real life, exploring the darkest parts of human nature, and making us face our own vulnerabilities.
And it reminds us that even when things seem really dark, there's always the possibility for redemption, for growth, for choosing a different path. Always.
So for everyone listening, I hope this has sparked some interesting thoughts for you too. It definitely has for me.
The cool thing about a deep dive like this is it's just the start. It's a jumping off point to explore more, have those tough conversations, find different perspectives, and ultimately become more informed and engaged. you know.
Exactly. And with that, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. As always, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep those minds working. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic to dive into. Until then, stay curious.